In 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire fell. Or did it? What if the greatest civilization the world had ever known didn't collapse in a single moment, but instead slowly forgot who it was? What if Rome didn't fall to barbarians, but to something far more insidious: amnesia? Consider this. For centuries after Rome's fall, people still lived in Roman cities. They still used Roman roads. They still spoke Latin. They still claimed to be Roman. Yet within 2 generations, they could no longer build what their grandparents built. They could no longer read what their ancestors wrote. They could no longer remember how their empire worked. Today, we follow the evidence where history stops and questions begin. Prepare yourself. This story changes everything. Trust me, you don't want to miss what we uncovered next. Like the video and subscribe so you're notified when the next story drops. So, let's continue. In 1986, archaeologists excavating beneath a parking garage in York, England, uncovered something extraordinary: a Roman sewer system still functioning after 1,600 years. The engineering was flawless: precise angles, perfect drainage, self-cleaning gradients. But here's what stunned the researchers. By 600 CE, just 150 years after Rome's official fall, the people living directly above this marvel had completely forgotten it existed. They were dumping waste in the streets. York was once Iboracum, a vital Roman military fortress and civilian settlement. At its height in the 3rd century CE, it had running water, heated floors, public baths, a sewage system superior to anything London would achieve until the Victorian era. The Romans knew how to move water uphill using inverted siphons. They understood hydraulic cement that could set underwater. They built aqueducts that still carry water today in places like Segovia, Spain. Yet by the year 700, across former Roman territories, this knowledge had vanished. Not just forgotten, erased. Here's the central mystery. How does an empire that spans 3 continents, that governs 70 million people, that possesses the most sophisticated administrative system in human history, how does it not just fall, but forget? The traditional narrative is simple: barbarian invasions, economic collapse, political fragmentation. Rome fell in 476 CE when the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus. End of story. But the archaeological evidence tells a very different tale. In 2017, researchers analyzing ice core data from Greenland made a startling discovery. Lead pollution levels, a proxy for Roman mining and smelting activity, didn't crash in 476 CE. They declined gradually over 2 centuries. Economic activity persisted, trade networks functioned, cities remained inhabited. What collapsed wasn't Rome itself, it was the idea of Rome. The machinery kept running even as people forgot how to operate it. Historian Brian Ward Perkins documented this phenomenon in his study of pottery production. In 400 CE, even poor Roman households used mass-produced ceramics, standardized, high-quality, shipped across the empire. By 550 CE, pottery had become crude, handmade, local. Not because people chose simplicity, because they'd forgotten how to organize the supply chains, the kilns, the distribution networks. The knowledge didn't survive the institutions. But the evidence forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. What if Rome's collapse wasn't an invasion or an economic crisis, but a cognitive one? Let's examine what disappeared and how quickly. The Pont du Gard aqueduct in southern France stands 160 feet high. Built in 50 CE without mortar, using stones weighing up to 6 tons each, fitted with millimeter precision. By 600 CE, local populations couldn't repair it. They didn't understand the surveying techniques that created its perfect 1 in 3,000 gradients over 31 miles. Within 150 years, the capacity to maintain Rome's greatest infrastructure had evaporated. Literacy provides even starker evidence. In Roman Britain circa 300 CE, We find tax records on wooden tablets, personal letters from common soldiers, graffiti in working-class neighborhoods, business contracts in provincial towns. Functional literacy extended deep into society. By 600 CE, literacy in Britain had collapsed to perhaps 1% of the population, and that 1% were monks copying Latin texts they often didn't understand. At the monastery of Lindisfarne in 700 CE, scribes were producing some of medieval Europe's most beautiful manuscripts. But when researchers analyzed their copying errors, they found something unsettling. The monks were treating Latin text as purely visual patterns. They were copying letter shapes without comprehending the words. Architecture tells the same story. The Basilica of Maxentius in Rome, completed in 312 CE, has a concrete dome spanning 83 feet. Its roof weighs approximately 10,000 tons, supported by an arch system requiring precise understanding of load distribution. When people in the 9th century wanted to build large churches, they'd forgotten how. Medieval structures used thick walls and small windows because they'd lost the engineering principles that allowed Romans to create vast interior spaces with minimal supports. It took 800 years until the Gothic Revolution of the 12th century before European builders rediscovered some of these techniques. And even then, they were learning from Islamic architects who had preserved Roman and Greek knowledge. The evidence is overwhelming. This wasn't gradual decline. This was systematic knowledge loss across multiple domains simultaneously: medicine, law, engineering, hydraulics, agriculture, logistics, all vanishing within a handful of generations. Transition. But this was only the beginning. The most disturbing pattern appears when we examine what people thought they were preserving. In 537 CE, the Byzantine Empire, the direct continuation of Rome in the east, completed the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. A masterwork, a dome 102 feet across, seemingly floating on light. Emperor Justinian reportedly declared, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." Yet even this spectacular achievement reveals profound loss. The Hagia Sophia's dome partially collapsed in 558 CE, just 21 years after completion, because the builders no longer fully understood the Roman engineering principles they were attempting to replicate. They were working from institutional memory, not genuine comprehension. Recent archaeological work reveals something even stranger: deliberate abandonment of Roman technology. In 2019, excavations in Gaul uncovered a Roman hypocaust heating system, underfloor heating using hot air circulation, that had been intentionally filled in with rubble around 520 CE. The building was still occupied. People simply stopped using the technology. Why? Dr. Catherine Roth of Cambridge proposes a chilling answer. They stopped using it because no one remembered how to fix it when it broke. Rather than live with broken technology they couldn't understand, they reverted to what they knew: open fires. Across former Roman territories, a pattern emerges. In Hispania, Spain, mining operations using water-powered ore crushing machinery, abandoned by 500 CE in favor of hand tools. In North Africa, sophisticated irrigation systems requiring seasonal maintenance, gradually silting up after 450 CE. In Gaul, France, road networks with engineered drainage, deteriorating as locals quarried the stones for other purposes, not understanding the road's structural principles. In Britain, villa estates with underfloor heating, glazed windows, and tile roofs, replaced by timber halls with thatch and central hearths by 550 CE. These weren't people choosing simplicity. They were people confronting technology they could no longer comprehend or maintain. And here's what makes this truly anomalous. Many of these populations still call themselves Roman. In 550 CE, a Gaulish nobleman would still identify as a Roman citizen. He'd wear a toga at formal occasions. He'd quote Virgil, or at least claim to. But he lived in a wooden structure, used hand-forged iron instead of standardized steel. couldn't read the Latin inscriptions on his grandfather's tombstone. Cultural identity persisted even as material culture collapsed. The implications stretch far beyond a single civilization.
So, what actually happened? The traditional barbarian invasion narrative isn't sufficient. Yes, Germanic tribes crossed imperial borders. Yes, there was violence. Yes, political authority fragmented. But this doesn't explain the knowledge collapse. Modern research offers more complex answers.
Dr. Brian Ward Perkins argues that Roman civilization depended on complex, interconnected networks: trade, administration, military, education. When political fragmentation disrupted these networks, the knowledge they transmitted simply stopped flowing. Think of it this way. A smartphone depends on global supply chains involving dozens of countries. If those networks break, no individual community can recreate the technology, even if they still possess functioning phones. The system was the technology. Oxford's Chris Wickham emphasizes literacy's central role. Roman technical knowledge was transmitted through texts, engineering manuals, agricultural guides, medical treatises, legal codes. As literacy collapsed, the ability to access this preserved knowledge collapsed with it. But why did literacy collapse? Because Roman education required schools with trained teachers, supply of papyrus or parchment, economic surplus to support non-productive scholars, cultural value placed on learning. When tax revenues dried up, schools closed. When trade networks broke, papyrus stopped arriving. When survival became paramount, literacy became a luxury. The most disturbing possibility: Roman knowledge was never written down completely. Much of Roman engineering was transmitted through apprenticeship. Master builders trained successors on site. Skills were demonstrated, not documented. When those institutions, the guilds, the Army Engineering Corps, the imperial building programs dissolved, the knowledge dissolved with them. You cannot learn to build an aqueduct from a book. You must watch someone do it. And when the last master dies without training an apprentice, that knowledge is gone forever. This forces us to reconsider what we mean by civilization. The collapse of Rome changed everything about European society for the next millennium. Population. In 400 CE, Rome itself housed approximately 1 million people. By 600 CE, perhaps 30,000. The city didn't return to 1 million inhabitants until the 1930s. London followed a similar trajectory. Roman Londinium at its peak, 60,000 people. By 700 CE, maybe 10,000. London didn't regain its Roman population until around 1400 CE, 900 years later. Life expectancy. Roman citizens in urban areas, approximately 25 to 30 years average, with substantial numbers reaching 60 to 70. Early medieval, dropping to 20 to 25 years average, with far fewer elderly. Trade. Mediterranean trade in 400 CE moved millions of amphora, standardized shipping containers, annually. By 600 CE, long-distance trade had become so rare that a single shipment of Egyptian papyrus to France was considered a major event. The psychological impact may have been even more profound. Medieval Europeans lived among Roman ruins they couldn't replicate. They walked on roads they couldn't repair. They found inscriptions they couldn't read. This created a civilization haunted by its own past, a past that seemed more capable, more organized, more advanced than the present. It's why medieval legends often placed magical or supernatural origins on Roman structures. The Colosseum wasn't built by engineers, it was the work of demons or ancient sorcerers. They literally couldn't conceive that humans like themselves had built such things. Ongoing research continues to refine our understanding. LiDAR surveys in 2022 revealed that many abandoned Roman rural estates actually maintained occupation but reverted to subsistence farming, suggesting economic rather than population collapse.
DNA analysis published in 2023 shows surprising population continuity in many regions. The people didn't disappear, their lifestyle changed dramatically. Isotope analysis of teeth from medieval skeletons reveals protein deficiency and dietary stress compared to Roman-era remains from the same regions. Recent breakthroughs suggest we are only beginning to uncover the truth about how civilizations maintain or lose their knowledge base. The most profound questions emerge when we ask, could this happen again? Consider our own technological civilization. How much of it do you understand? Could you produce antibiotics from scratch, generate electricity without existing infrastructure, create microchips, synthesize fertilizer, refine petroleum? The answer for virtually everyone is no. Our technology depends on vast, interconnected networks of specialized knowledge. No individual understands more than a tiny fraction. We trust a system to preserve and transmit knowledge across generations. Rome's collapse reveals how fragile that trust might be. The Romans weren't primitives. They were sophisticated, educated, organized. They had libraries, they had schools, they had technical manuals. Yet within 2 centuries, their descendants were living in conditions that wouldn't have been recognizable as Roman to their ancestors. The question isn't whether we're smarter than Romans. The question is whether our systems for preserving knowledge are more robust than theirs were. Some scholars draw direct parallels. When the Library of Alexandria burned, irreplaceable texts were lost forever. When Baghdad's House of Wisdom was destroyed by Mongols in 1258, centuries of scientific advancement vanished. Today, vast quantities of human knowledge exist only in digital formats. What happens if the electrical grid fails for an extended period? If supply chains collapse? If the specialists who maintain critical systems die without training replacements? Our civilization has created technologies more complex than Rome's, but have we created more resilient institutions for preserving them? Perhaps the deepest question is this: did Rome fall, or are we still living in its slow collapse? Consider, the Renaissance was sparked by rediscovering Roman and Greek texts. The Enlightenment built on Roman legal principles. Our modern governance structures echo Roman republicanism. We never fully surpassed Rome. We spent 1,000 years trying to remember what they knew. And we're still excavating their ruins, still finding technologies we struggle to replicate, still asking how they achieved what they achieved. We opened by asking whether Rome fell or forgot itself. The evidence suggests both. Historians agree on the facts: political fragmentation after 476 CE, economic disruption, population decline in urban centers, dramatic technological regression. What remains debated is the mechanism. Was this inevitable given external pressures? Was it a failure of institutions? A perfect storm of crisis and systemic vulnerability? What's clear is this: civilizations don't just build monuments and machines. They built systems for preserving the knowledge of how to build monuments and machines. When those systems fail, everything else follows. Rome's story is humanity's story. The eternal struggle, not just to create, but to remember. We are always one generation away from forgetting everything our ancestors knew. The past is deeper than we imagined, and the search continues. History is not just what survived, it's also what was forgotten.